On the evening of September 18th, 2021, the Nguyen family in Canada had planned a cozy family gathering. However, when the appointed time came, the couple Quoc Tran and Christine Nguyen failed to show up. This immediately raised alarm bells, because in the eyes of family and loved ones, Quoc and Christy had always been disciplined, punctual people who valued privacy. Whenever there was any change in plans, even if they were just running late or couldn't make it, they would always call ahead to avoid making others wait or worry. Time passed in anxious anticipation. Phone calls went unanswered. Text messages received no reply. That unusual silence gradually transformed into palpable unease. By this point, parental instinct told them something was terribly wrong with their children. Unable to wait any longer, the following morning, Christy and Quoc's parents rushed to the police station to file a missing persons report. A missing persons file was promptly opened by police. According to initial information gathered, before their disappearance, Quoc and Christy had driven away from home, heading toward the garden supply store they jointly managed in the city of Vaughan. The couple's plan for that day was fairly straightforward. Stop by the store to handle some business matters, then return home in time for the family gathering that evening. Security camera footage showed that at approximately 4:50 p.m. on September 18th, Quoc and Christy appeared near the intersection of Warden Avenue and Highway 7 in the city of Markham. This area was very close to their residence, so investigators believed the couple may have simply stopped to pick up some items or handle a quick errand on their way. Shortly afterward, around 5:30 p.m., they drove to Warehouse Unit 6 at 111 Zenway Boulevard, Vaughan, the location of their store, Ultra Garden Supply. From that moment on, the young couple vanished completely without a trace. At this point, the only location that might hold answers to the mysterious disappearance of Quoc and Christy was the warehouse where they were last seen. Recognizing the severity of the situation, the investigative team arrived at Unit 6 of Ultra Garden Supply the very next day to conduct a search and look for clues. On the surface, the scene appeared completely calm. The warehouse door was shut tight, the lock intact, with no signs of forced entry or disturbance that would indicate a break-in or altercation. Yet it was precisely this peaceful normalcy that immediately put the experienced investigators on high alert. One crucial detail quickly caught their attention. The couple's car was still parked in the lot in front of the warehouse. This meant Quoc and Christy had never driven away from this location, completely contradicting any theory that they had voluntarily disappeared. For investigators, this was an extremely suspicious sign, since in most cases of voluntary disappearance, personal vehicles are rarely left behind. From this detail, a frightening possibility began to emerge. It was very likely that both of them had met with foul play inside the warehouse. Officers immediately began collecting footage from all security cameras in the surrounding area while cordoning off the scene in preparation for a thorough search. The atmosphere grew heavy and tense. Through professional instinct, the investigators understood that behind this seemingly quiet absence might lie evidence of a serious crime, perhaps even a horrific tragedy waiting to be uncovered. When investigators officially entered Warehouse Unit 6, they were immediately struck by an atmosphere so cold and still it sent chills down their spines. In the retail area where the victims sold gardening equipment, everything appeared neat and orderly, with no signs of robbery or ransacking. However, this too-perfect order only deepened the investigators' unease. With sharp professional eyes, they quickly discovered in the storage area at the back, on the floor and along sections of the walls, small, dark stains. Faint but impossible to ignore. Drawing on years of experience, the investigators suspected these were dried bloodstains, remnants left behind from an act of violence that had occurred at this location. That wasn't all. A faint smell of cleaning chemicals lingered in the air, enough to raise suspicions that someone had deliberately tried to clean the crime scene to conceal evidence. Most significantly, identification documents, wallets, and cell phones belonging to both Quoc Tran and Christine Nguyen were found inside the warehouse. This strongly indicated that the couple had become victims right at this very scene, never leaving of their own volition. The warehouse that Quoc and Christy rented had a basic security camera system installed, primarily covering the parking lot in front and the common alley behind the warehouse complex. On September 19th, Police quickly extracted and reviewed all relevant camera footage, hoping to trace the couple's final moments before they vanished. The footage captured partially confirmed the timeline provided by the family. The video showed that around 5:30 p.m. on September 18th, Quoc Tran and Christine Nguyen drove up to the warehouse, got out, and walked inside together. The warehouse door closed behind them, and from that point forward, the cameras recorded no images showing the couple exiting. Shortly afterward, another detail captured the investigators' particular attention. The camera recorded an unfamiliar man briefly appearing in front of the warehouse door. Due to poor lighting conditions and limited camera angles, the image was blurry, making it impossible to clearly identify his face or specific features. Nevertheless, this man's appearance at such a sensitive moment, right after the couple had entered the warehouse, immediately raised serious suspicion. Drawing on their investigative experience, the detectives quickly concluded that this individual could very well be the perpetrator, or at the very least, someone directly connected to whatever happened on that fateful afternoon. Yet at this stage, the case had hit a troubling dead end. There were no direct witnesses, no bodies had been found, and there was no clear-cut evidence sufficient to conclude that a murder had actually occurred. All police had in hand were scattered suspicions and indirect clues that couldn't yet be pieced together into a complete picture. Under these circumstances, hunting for leads on the killer was like searching for a needle in a haystack. Facing mounting pressure from the victims' families and the public, police were forced to quickly pivot to advanced technical investigative methods. They expanded the scope of data collection, reviewed security camera footage from numerous neighboring areas, analyzed trace evidence at the crime scene, and cross-referenced it with related records, all in the hope that even the smallest details might lead to crucial clues, gradually peeling back the layers to reveal the true nature of this case. During this initial phase, the investigative team's top priority was to maximize the extraction of information about the victims themselves. Understanding Quoc and Christie's lives, work, and circle of relationships was seen as the key to identifying motives and narrowing down potential suspects. According to information provided by family members, Quoc Tran, 37, and Christine Nguyen, 25, were a Vietnamese-Canadian couple living in the city of Markham, Ontario. Quoc Tran was remembered by family and friends as a hard-working, composed man who always had clear goals in life. Starting from nothing, he had gradually built his own business, founding Ultra Garden Supply, a store specializing in gardening equipment and hydroponic growing systems, headquartered in the city of Vaughan. Notably, Ultra Garden Supply opened right in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, a time when countless businesses were struggling or being forced to shut down. Yet contrary to those widespread difficulties, Quoc's business actually did quite well. By seizing the right moment and building a reputation for reliability, Quoc gradually developed a stable customer base and began thinking about expanding into other markets once the situation normalized. Beyond his success at work, Quoc Tran was also well liked by those around him for his gentle, mature personality and responsible approach to life. In all his relationships, he maintained a courteous attitude, never getting into disputes or conflicts with anyone. To his family, Quoc was a devoted son who always cared for and gave his all for his loved ones. Christine Nguyen, Quoc Tran's girlfriend, was remembered by family and friends as a smart, determined young woman brimming with enthusiasm for the future ahead. She graduated from Wilfrid Laurier University in 2018 with a degree in psychology, a field requiring deep understanding of people and keen observational skills. Not content to stop there, Christie continued pursuing her education by enrolling in a paralegal certification program at Seneca College in Toronto, with the goal of gradually advancing deeper into the legal field. During her studies, Christie had completed an internship at a law firm where she gained direct exposure to the professional legal environment, further strengthening her determination to pursue a career in law. She harbored dreams of becoming a full-fledged lawyer and planned to study for a Master of Laws degree in England in the near future, viewing it as a crucial milestone for expanding her knowledge and advancing her chosen career path. Yet amid these lofty ambitions, Christie remained a daughter full of love and responsibility. Temporarily setting aside her study abroad plans, she chose to stay in Canada to help her mother manage the family's nail salon locally while gaining practical business experience. Alongside work, Christy devoted considerable time to caring for her mother, putting family first during this chapter of her life. In the eyes of those who knew her, Christy Nguyen was a multi-talented, kind-hearted, and deeply compassionate young woman. Quoc and Christy met through the Vietnamese community in the Toronto area, where relationships among fellow expatriates were often bonded through shared cultural understanding and mutual support. Despite a notable age difference between them, it never became a barrier in their relationship. On the contrary, Quoc and Christy proved to be remarkably compatible, in sync in both their thinking and their way of life. Their love grew stronger over time, becoming deep and solid, and they quickly became a couple cherished and trusted by both families and their circle of friends. By 2021, when their relationship had fully matured, the two began seriously discussing marriage. Following Vietnamese cultural tradition, Quoc Tran visited Christy's family home to formally ask for permission to marry her. Both families had agreed to arrange an official meeting to discuss wedding plans for 2022. For her part, Christy Nguyen was overjoyed and full of anticipation. She longed to don a wedding dress, build her own little family, and had already begun making numerous plans for the future ahead. But tragedy struck with brutal force. On September 18, 2021, just 1 week after Christy had attended Quoc's brother's wedding and was still dreaming about her own, both of them were gone forever in a heartbreaking end. Two young people carrying dreams, ambitions, and a fierce will to live, who had been the pride of their families and a source of strength for those around them, were suddenly taken from this world without a word of farewell. They had no significant conflicts within their community, no public disputes or obvious grudges. And so the biggest question remained unanswered. What could have caused this gentle, unassuming couple, standing on the threshold of happiness, to vanish without a trace? After days of investigation with no breakthrough, on September 27, 2021, police made a pivotal decision. They would seal off the entire warehouse complex at 111 Zenway Boulevard for the most thorough search possible. This was to be an exhaustive sweep, leaving no detail overlooked, no matter how small. Every square foot of the scene was placed under the close supervision of the investigative team, from the interiors of the warehouse units to the common walkways surrounding them. Beyond that, police also collected and searched through all dumpsters in the surrounding area. In parallel with the physical search of the premises, security camera systems were collected and analyzed in exhaustive detail. The scope extended beyond just cameras within the warehouse complex to include footage from businesses and facilities located miles away, all in an effort to track any unfamiliar vehicles that had entered or exited the area on the evening of the incident. And then, after days that had seemed hopeless, a valuable lead finally emerged. A security camera had captured unusual footage at 11:30 p.m. on September 18th. In the dim, deserted landscape of the industrial park after closing hours, a large white box truck quietly pulled into the alley behind the warehouse complex, stopping directly at the door of Unit 6, where Quoc and Christy had last been seen. The truck remained stationary for a short time, then silently drove away into the night. What made this footage particularly suspicious was the surrounding circumstances. It was a weekend night when the entire area was closed down, with no shipping or receiving activity taking place. The appearance of a delivery truck at such a late hour was extremely unusual. For this reason, investigators believed this truck was the key piece of the puzzle. It had very likely transported something away from the scene. And the most terrifying possibility was this: the victims' bodies had been taken away in that silent trip. Given the seriousness of the newly discovered lead, on September 28th, police quickly released images of the suspicious white box truck to the public, calling on residents throughout the region to proactively provide any information that might be relevant. This was seen as a critical move to break the stalemate that had dragged on for days and to leverage community support in tracking down the mysterious vehicle that had appeared on that fateful night. Also that same day, York Regional Police made a bombshell announcement that sent shockwaves through the public. Based on all evidence collected at the crime scene and preliminary investigative data, police stated that the missing couple, Quoc Tran and Christy Nguyen, had very likely been murdered at the warehouse on the evening of September 18th, 2021. More importantly, this was not an accident or a random incident. It was a targeted attack. Immediately following this statement, a nationwide arrest warrant was issued across Canada for a name completely unfamiliar to most of the public, Phuong Thanh Nguyen, commonly known as Mike, 35 years old, residing in Toronto. This man was wanted on 2 counts of first-degree murder, the most serious homicide charge under Canadian law. The news immediately shook the public, especially within the Vietnamese community. A flood of questions quickly arose. Who was Phuong Thanh Nguyen, and why had he become the prime suspect in such a horrific case? The fact that the suspect shared the same last name as one of the victims led many to wonder whether this might be a family dispute that had escalated into murder. However, police quickly dismissed this theory. They confirmed that despite sharing the surname Nguyen, Phuong Thanh Nguyen had no blood relation to Christy Nguyen, and the coincidence in names merely reflected the commonness of the surname Nguyen within the Vietnamese community. Nevertheless, police did confirm one important detail. The suspect was acquainted with the victims beforehand, and this case stemmed from a specific motive, rather than being a random, impulsive act. However, due to the need to protect the ongoing investigation and the manhunt for the fugitive suspect, details related to the motive could not yet be publicly disclosed. While the large-scale hunt for the primary suspect was underway, the image of the white box truck unexpectedly yielded results faster than anyone had hoped. Just 1 day after police issued their public appeal, on September 29, 2021, a major breakthrough occurred. Police arrested Ricardo Libourde, 36, a resident of Vaughan, identified as the driver of the truck that had appeared at the warehouse complex late on the night of September 18th. According to initial information from the investigation, Libourde was charged as an accessory in the double murder. However, police indicated that this man had not directly killed the 2 victims. Libourde's role was determined to be assisting the killer after the murders had already taken place, specifically participating in the disposal and concealment of the bodies. The arrest of Ricardo Libourde was seen as a breakthrough in the investigation. For the first time since the case began, police had in their custody a living witness with direct ties to the chain of events following the victims' deaths. Through Libourde's testimony and cooperation, investigators hope to gradually trace the whereabouts, motive, and specific role of Phuong Thanh Nguyen. During the interrogation and expanded investigation, detectives began piecing together a chilling picture of how the crime was concealed. Most significantly, one of the key pieces investigators uncovered was the truck's route on that night. The latest information from waste management companies revealed that on September 24, 2021, 6 days after the murders, a garbage truck had collected the large industrial dumpsters from the Vaughan area. This was an extremely important detail, as it suggested that the victims' bodies may have been disposed of shortly after the crime occurred. In particular, 2 industrial dumpsters had been hauled away from the area, intensifying suspicions that these containers may have held evidence or the victims' remains. According to investigators, a portion of the waste from these dumpsters was transported to the Twin Creeks Environmental Landfill in Watford, Ontario, near the city of Sarnia, approximately 155 miles west of the crime scene. The remaining portion of the waste, bearing suspicious indicators, may have been transported to a landfill across the U.S. border, possibly in the state of Michigan. This information aligned with Libourde's testimony, helping police identify the locations where they needed to search for the victims. On October 1, 2021, in an emotional press conference, York Regional Police officially announced devastating news. After days of searching, they had recovered the body of Quoc Tran at the Twin Creeks landfill in Watford, Ontario. Quoc's remains were found buried in the refuse and had taken many days of sifting to recover. A preliminary autopsy confirmed that Quoc had been killed by gunshot. However, Christy Nguyen's body had still not been found, making the case even more complex and haunting. Police believed Christy may have been dumped at the same Twin Creeks landfill or transported to a different landfill, possibly a location outside Ontario. The investigative team continued digging through tons of garbage for weeks afterward, but despite their best efforts, the search remained fruitless. Nevertheless, based on evidence collected at the scene and witness testimony, police affirmed that Christie had been killed at the same time as Kwok. Throughout the final months of 2021 and into early 2022, the hunt for Phuong Thanh Nguyen expanded to an international scale. Investigators determined that immediately after committing the crime, Phuong Thanh Nguyen had fled, and records showed he had boarded a flight from Toronto to Mexico on September 22, 2021, just 4 days after the murders. After that, Phuong Thanh Nguyen vanished without a trace, making the search all the more urgent. Canadian police coordinated with Interpol and Mexican authorities to track the fugitive on a global scale. By January 2023, York Regional Police decided to intensify the manhunt, partnering with the BOLO program, Be on the Lookout, an initiative that uses social media to locate wanted criminals. A $50,000 reward was announced for anyone who could provide information leading to the arrest of Phuong Thanh Nguyen. With the powerful reach of media coverage and mounting public pressure, police hoped the substantial reward would motivate the community to come forward with crucial tips, helping to bring the killer to justice sooner. While the international manhunt continued, justice at home had begun to be partially served. Ricardo Liberd, the accomplice in the disposal of the victims' bodies, had been held in custody and was preparing to face trial. The investigation into Liberd stretched over 3 years, as authorities needed time to gather sufficient evidence and await results from the search for Christie's remains. It was not until early 2025 that significant progress was made when Liberd unexpectedly pleaded guilty and confessed to his role in disposing of the bodies. Specifically on January 7, 2025, at the Newmarket Courthouse in Ontario, Ricardo Liberd broke down sobbing during his hearing when the judge asked if he understood the consequences of entering a guilty plea. After a brief pause to collect himself, Liberd agreed to plead guilty to 2 counts of indignity to human remains. Under the plea agreement, Liberd accepted these charges in exchange for the more serious accessory charges being dropped. Prosecutors agreed to the deal because their primary objective was to apprehend Phuong Thanh Nguyen, the mastermind behind the murders. Phuong Thanh Nguyen is now 37 years old and formerly resided in Toronto. He is also of Vietnamese descent and commonly goes by the name Mike. Information about Phuong Nguyen is relatively scarce. He has no blood relation to the victims, but was acquainted with them beforehand. Some sources indicate that Phuong had prior business dealings with Quoc Tran, possibly as a customer purchasing gardening equipment or through some form of business partnership. In terms of physical description, Phuong Nguyen stands approximately 5 feet 9 inches tall, weighs around 180 pounds, has a medium build, short black hair, and brown eyes. Before the crime, Phuong had no prior criminal record and had never appeared in any serious crime files maintained by police. York Regional Police have suggested he may have always lived under the guise of an ordinary person, quiet, unassuming, and drawing no attention. However, the fact that he planned this targeted killing reveals Phuong to be an extremely cold and calculating individual. He brought a gun to meet the victims, a clear indication that the intent to kill was premeditated. After taking both lives, he calmly arranged for the disposal of the bodies and prepared his escape route abroad, all within a matter of days. This behavior demonstrates a cold-bloodedness and cunning rarely seen in a first-time offender. Throughout more than 4 years on the run, Phuong seems to have vanished into thin air. Police believe he may possess financial resources or is receiving significant assistance to remain hidden. Investigators have also warned that Phuong Thanh Nguyen is believed to be armed and extremely dangerous. For this reason, the public is strongly advised not to approach him directly if his whereabouts are discovered. The motive behind Phuong's decision to commit this crime remains a major question mark to this day. Due to the lack of any confession from the killer, authorities have not yet been able to issue an official conclusion. However, numerous theories have been put forward, including business disputes or financial debts, personal or romantic conflicts, or even involvement in criminal activities such as drug trafficking or money laundering through business operations. Given the circumstances, the most likely scenario appears to be a dispute over money or business interests. It cannot be ruled out that Phuong Thanh Nguyen was connected to some illicit operation and had a falling out with Quoc. It's also possible that Phuong harbored jealousy toward Quoc's success or had accumulated personal grudges over time. But whatever the specific motive, The brutality of his actions points to a deep-seated hatred and a clear intent to kill, far beyond any ordinary impulsive act. The murder of the couple, Quoc Tran and Christine Nguyen, sent shockwaves through Canadian society, particularly within the Vietnamese community in the Toronto area. Local and national media covered the story extensively, from the initial search for the missing persons through to the confirmation that this was a serious homicide case. The public was stunned by the brutal nature of the crime and the sophisticated methods of the killer. Many expressed boundless grief for the tragic young couple. They still had bright futures ahead of them, and their deaths left everyone heartbroken. Libur's testimony in court revealed chilling details about what truly happened on the night of September 18, 2021. Liber disclosed that Phuong Thanh Nguyen had called him and asked him to drive a truck to the warehouse in Vaughan to pick up some items. Liber drove the white truck there and backed up to the door of Unit 6, where Quoc and Christie had last been seen. He then met Phuong, and together they loaded 2 large objects wrapped in black plastic sheeting onto the truck. Those objects were the bodies of the victims. After disposing of the victims' bodies, according to Phuong Thanh Nguyen's instructions, Ricardo Liber drove the truck to a location just a few miles from the crime scene. There, he threw the 2 large plastic-wrapped bundles containing the bodies into a large industrial dumpster. Liber admitted that although he had recognized something sinister about what he was doing, he had deliberately turned a blind eye and asked no questions about the cargo being transported, even though he clearly knew something was wrong. After completing the disposal task, Liber drove home, concluding the job that Phuong Thanh Nguyen had hired him to do. Liber's confession was fully consistent with the evidence police had collected, closing the chapter on his role in the case. On the defense side, Liber's attorney presented mitigating factors, such as the fact that the defendant had not directly committed the killings, had no prior criminal record, and had cooperated by entering a guilty plea. However, prosecutors strongly condemned Libur's actions, emphasizing the immorality of turning a blind eye to such a serious crime when he should have spoken up. Liber is currently being held in custody while awaiting sentencing. Under Canadian law, the offense of indignity to human remains carries a maximum penalty of 5 years in prison per count. Liber will likely receive a sentence of several years for each charge, with the possibility of partial suspension if the court considers the mitigating factors. The more than 3 years he has already spent in custody may be credited toward his sentence, significantly reducing the time he will need to spend behind bars. As for Phuong Thanh Nguyen, once he is apprehended and extradited to Canada, he will face 2 counts of first-degree murder, the most serious charge in the Canadian legal system. The penalty could be life imprisonment without the possibility of parole for at least 25 years. Throughout 4 long years of following the legal proceedings, the families of Christine Nguyen and Quoc Tran have endured unimaginable pain over a loss that can never be undone. However, they have found some measure of solace in Ricardo Libur's guilty plea, viewing it as the first step in the journey toward justice for their daughter and son. Still, they continue to await the day when the true mastermind, Phuong Thanh Nguyen, is captured and punished accordingly. The victims' families have also expressed their hope that Christie can be properly laid to rest, wishing to find her remains so that the family may finally find peace. The family's attorney has stated that when the trial of Phuong Thanh Nguyen begins, the prosecution will request the court to impose the harshest possible sentence, to serve as a deterrent against such brutal acts, and to bring some measure of comfort to the loved ones devastated by this tragedy. This verdict will be an essential part of the journey toward justice. Although the role of accomplice Ricardo Liber has now been clarified and he will be held accountable under the law, the mastermind Phuong Thanh Nguyen remains at large. York Regional Police have vowed to continue the pursuit relentlessly and to cooperate with all international law enforcement agencies to bring him before the court, where he will face the monstrous crimes he committed. What do you think happened between Quoc Tran and Phuong Thanh Nguyen that drove Phuong to commit such a brutal act? Please share your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.